We're going to do a little bit of a review before we get to the characters that I want to look at tonight. We've been at this for 8 weeks now, and so we've looked at 8 stories, but we've talked about 11 different people because the last story had these 5 sisters. And we've looked at these 8 stories that are places in the Bible where they slow down just long enough to take notice of someone that perhaps the rest of history had forgotten. I want to take a minute again to remember who we have met. We met Shamgar, who famously killed 600 Philistines with a farming tool and did all of that, saved the nation while most people were holed up at home avoiding the crowds. The woman of Thebez, who dropped a millstone on a tyrant's head from a rooftop, and we learned about how that story became a proverb for future military leaders and their hubris of getting too close to danger. We talked about Jabez. We talked about that famous book that was written about Jabez and how really Jabez was buried in a genealogy, and Jabez carried this name that meant great pain, but had this prayer that was very bold, and it was answered. Then we talked about Rhoda, which might have been my favorite story, that servant girl who got so excited whenever she heard Peter's voice. She runs away from the door without actually opening it and letting him in, and I love the humanity in that story. We talked about Epaphroditus. I also love the humanity of Epaphroditus, someone who had rolled the dice with their own life, to risk their own life, got very sick trying to go to take care of Paul, ended up being taken care of himself, and who Paul thought it noteworthy to include that person's name in a book that we're still talking about. And then we also, of course, had the boy with the barley bread and the sardines who fed 20,000 people because he was open-handed. And then last week we looked at Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah, which if any of you expectant mothers out there are looking for names, there are some terrible ones right there. But they basically got the entire nation of Israel's laws changed because they simply asked. They boldly asked. And we talked about the power of that. And what I love about these is each has been a little bit different. The themes are kind of there, woven through a little bit, but none of these are recorded for the same reason. I mean, none of the actions taken are identical. And you look at these texts, like some of them were very bold, kind of loud, audacious moves, and then you had some of them were kind of quiet, maybe even you would consider invisible, and they yet were sustained in some way. Some of them were one dramatic act that they were known for, which we're going to talk about one of those tonight. And then some of them were just kind of, hey, they showed up day after day, and that's kind of what they were noteworthy for as well. We're going to talk about one of those tonight. But we're going to close with these, who again, they couldn't be more different. Let's go to 2 Samuel, chapter 23. We're going to look at this little text here about a man by the name of Benaiah. And again, the first sentence here, the first verse has kind of a mouthful with names, so don't get too overwhelmed with the mealy-mouthed nature of these, but let's talk about Benaiah for a second. 2 Samuel chapter 23, starting in verse 20. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, a valiant fighter from Kabzeel, performed great exploits. Oh yeah, what did he do? Well, he struck down Moab's 2 mightiest warriors. He also went down into a pit on a snowy day and killed a lion. And he struck down a huge Egyptian. Although the Egyptian had a spear in his hand, Benaiah went against him with a club, and he snatched the spear from the Egyptian's hand and killed him with his own spear. Such were the exploits of Benaiah, son of Jehoiada. He too was as famous as the 3 mighty warriors. Well, yeah, naturally. He was held in greater honor than any of the 30, but he was not included among the 3. Interesting tag to that sentence. We'll talk about that. And David put him in charge of his bodyguard. Now, there are a few things we could draw our attention to. We could draw our attention to the military exploits there. That's kind of cool. But I want to actually talk about the lion for just a second, because I think that's the interesting sentence that got my attention. You have this lion that presumably fell into a pit. I don't know. It doesn't say how it got into the pit. I don't know if it cornered itself, someone drove it into the pit. I'm not exactly sure how this happened, but it doesn't tell us how it got there. It does tell us what Benaiah does about it. He goes down into the pit with the lion. Anybody interested in joining a lion in a snowy pit? I also love the detail that it was snowy, by the way, because I kind of have this mental picture of what it's like whenever there's snow on the ground and there's this deep hole. It's wet, it's slippery, it's literally cold. This idea that it is limited visibility and it restricts your movement. And does anyone else agree that a pit would probably be a more dangerous place to encounter a lion than just like out in the open somewhere? Because the lion, you've got fight or flight. He can't flight, he can't go anywhere. So you're sort of back to back with the lion. You're stuck with each other. You got to do something about it. But he voluntarily goes down into this lion pit. And the physics of this, again, are interesting. Benaiah climbs down, corners the lion, snowy day, kills it. And also, did you notice here too, nobody asked him to do this. Like, David's not there, like, commanding him, go kill that lion. There is no divine mandate. There's no, clouds that spell out, go kill the lion, or burning bush, or anything like that. There is no, by the way, strategic military advantage or necessity of killing this lion. You've not drafted the lion into your army in some way. You're just killing it. Basically, a lion falls into a pit, and Benaiah looked at it and thought, I should go deal with that. Jumps into the lion, kills the lion. Interesting story. And by the way, that's basically the whole story. This is like how he got remembered. These sentences are kind of it for him. But here is the detail I don't want you to miss, because I think this makes it more than just a story about a brave man. It starts talking about the honor that Benaiah received, or maybe you could even say lack thereof. He's received some notoriety, and it talks about this notoriety. He says he was held in greater honor than any of the 30, which was like the second tier of David's mighty men, but it specifically says he was not included among the 3. So he is the best of the second place guys. But it's weird, isn't it weird that it literally notes that? That it specifically says he was this famous, but no more famous than that. He was this well known, but he didn't quite make it into this upper echelon thing. The 3, by the way, that's like the elite inner circle. And these are the guys whose military exploits were legendary. And Benaiah is like, well, he's just below them. He's in that second group. He never made the first. Greater's of the runner-up. And I just kind of have to wonder, if that stung in any way? If he's wondering, is he internalizing that at all? Like how famous, what do I got to do? I killed a lion? What do I got to do? Did you see how big that Egyptian was? I took his spear. I had nothing but a club. I killed him with his own spear. What do you have to do to get famous around here, or at least get in the upper echelon? But I don't really see any of that pity party. It just kind of keeps going, keeps fighting, keeps chasing lions into pits on snowy days. It does say there, the very end of verse 23, says that David put him in charge of his bodyguard. So there's that. Remarkable honor. But he was never the top designation. And it makes me reflective, right? In the moments where I've been good. Not great or the greatest, but good. Faithful, fine, yes. Good job. You got your moments, bud. I kind of understand that feeling a little bit, where you do your work and you take care of whatever problem that you need to take care of, but you still don't make the top 3. You're still not breaking through to the very top. Let's put him aside for a second. We'll talk more about him in a minute. Let's go to 1 Kings chapter 18. 1 Kings chapter 18. I'll give you the context after I read this. I kind of love parts of Elijah's story. Again, the humanity of this. And we have a very interesting part right here that we're not talking about Elijah. We're talking about someone else here. 1 Kings chapter 18, starting in verse 1, the Bible says this: After a long time, in the 3rd year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land. So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. Just pause and just say, this is where Elijah had prophesied a drought, and the drought comes, and then finally it's like the drought's going to be over. Famine's going to end. But look at the famine, how bad it was, verse 2. The famine was very severe in Samaria, and Ahab had summoned Obadiah, there's the character I want to look at, his palace administrator. And look at this parenthetical note, very interesting. Obadiah was a devout believer in the Lord. While Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them in 2 caves, 50 in each, and had supplied them with food and water. Now, first thing, same God, same Almighty God in this story, but this is a completely different story. First of all, let's talk about the context for a second. you have Ahab. Ahab is not just bad. Ahab is the worst. In fact, 1 Kings literally says that he was the most wicked king Israel ever had, which can we all confess is really saying something, because they had some real bozos. And so he was the worst of all of them. That's a remarkable designation of truly terrible leaders. And his wife, Jezebel, is literally conducting an organized campaign to eliminate every prophet of Almighty God in all of Israel. It is a systematic purge. And it was pretty successful. People are getting killed here left and right. Prophets are being hunted down and killed. Now, inside of the palace, where Ahab and Jezebel are commanding these murders, you have this guy named Obadiah. He is an administrator. He would be considered kind of the chief of staff. He was the most senior member of the most dangerous, most hostile, most actively anti-God royal court in Israel's history. And what that means is, every day he walks into the palace and he manages the household and he serves that king, and he's embedded in that system where all of God's people are being given murder warrants. He is, from the outside, if you're just like a Joe Schmo who walks by that court, he's on the inside of it. He's one of them. I mean, look at that guy. He is an official in Ahab's court. So this stuff is happening, and you would, from the outside, assume this guy's a part of that. Very interesting, because while he may appear to be a part of it, what is he doing? Very quietly, secretly, in fact, he is behind the scenes taking these prophets and he's saving their lives by hiding them in caves. 2 different caves, 2 different locations, 50 men each, and he is feeding them. By the way, feeding them during a famine. And I don't know what administrative shenanigans he's got to do in order to make that happen, but I'm assuming he's doing a shell game at some point where he's hiding food to give it to these prophets, and he is keeping them alive. Now, this is very much a different ball game than jumping into a snowy pit and killing a lion, is it not? Jumping into a pit and killing a lion takes a moment of sheer bravery, maybe even stupidity, masculinity maybe, I don't know what the word is. That takes this one moment, right? But what is Obadiah doing? He is doing this day after day after day. He is doing the sustained, ongoing, daily commitment. He is keeping a secret. He is risking his life. And every single time Jezebel sends these armed men to search for prophets to kill, Obadiah has to act normal. He has to just act normal, like all of this is fine. Every time Ahab asked him about the state of the palace, he has to act normal. He has got to talk to that man who he knows is putting to death prophets of God, just like it's a normal Tuesday. He is living a double life, and he's not doing it for some kind of personal gain or some kind of hidden sinful reason. He's living a double life because there are people whose lives depend on him staying calm in those situations, and so he's doing that. Remarkable. And I think there's something strange here, and that is that Obadiah does not reform Ahab. In fact, there doesn't really even seem to be an attempt to do so. And also, conversely, Ahab does not corrupt Obadiah. Both of them seem fixed in their spiritual position. Obadiah is the most corrupt environment. He's in the most corrupt environment imaginable, and he doesn't become it. What he does is he stays in the lion den without becoming a lion and without being eaten by the lion. It's the stasis. Very interesting. Very interesting, the juxtaposition of these 2 stories. Because what's interesting is, I feel like, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like we celebrate Benaiah's type of faithfulness a little bit more. Because we like bold, visible, audacious, makes a good story, is a cool flannel graph, is memorable, and during VBS, we can get up here and kind of act it out, and the kids will cheer for it. That's the kind of story that we're like, yeah, let's put it on a t-shirt. We chased lions. Like, oh, that's tweetable right there. Like, we chased the lions. And there is something, I think, certainly worth celebrating there. I mean, it's included in the story. Benaiah's courage is real. God used it. But I do think we tend to overlook Obadiah's type of faith or faithfulness, where you can go into the corrupted environment and stay there and stay faithful behind the scenes. There's just something powerful about that quiet, invisible, sustained faithfulness of someone who stayed in a hard place and does good from the inside, and does it, by the way, without recognition, without applause, in fact, without anyone even knowing. That's got to be part of it. No one finds out. We sometimes even kind of maybe might question people like this. Like, shouldn't he have left? Shouldn't he have spoken up? You had an opportunity to stop this. You know, why didn't you go pull an Esther and go to the king and be like, hey, king, these are my people, can you quit? Shouldn't he have done something more visible or dramatic or obviously heroic or whatever? But he doesn't do that because that's not what I think God needed him to do. And you know what he does? He does exactly what Elijah needed him to do. He did exactly what the next generation of faithful men and women needed him to do. And they survived because one man stayed in this place that he easily could have left, and he kept his mouth shut about what he was doing, and he showed up with bread and water day after day, after day, after day, after day. I think, and again, I mean, I'm not saying I've got this on lock, but I think sometimes the bravest thing you can do is just stay faithful on the inside. It doesn't mean you got to like change everything in the environment and you got to like push back the wall of evil, in an epic battle, but just keep your feet planted and stay faithful where you're at, despite the chaos that's going on around you. I just think there's something about that. And I wonder too, even like when you read these kind of stories about this guy who has this huge warrior mentality, and he rips his spear away and kills him with it and jumps into a lion pit and he kills the lion and all that. Are you like, yeah, that's who I want to be? Or could you possibly read Obadiah's story? He's skulking around, sneaking around behind the scenes, pulling in some bread here and some water there and sneaking in and feeding. I wonder if you could aspire to that. Or I wonder, like, which one are you even wired to be? Which one of those are you more wired to be? Which one are you actually doing? Some of you certainly are Benaiahs. You're wired for bold, visible, charge at the problem faithfulness. You see a lion in the pit, and you're like, hey, something inside me says go. I'm going to go. And maybe there's even some of you that need to muster up some Benaiah, because it's unlikely that you're facing an actual lion, but maybe a really hard conversation. Or maybe some kind of risk or some kind of commitment or some kind of calling that you've got, some kind of big decision you've got, and you're kind of standing at the pit. It's time to jump in. Maybe that's you. Maybe you've been waiting for someone to give you permission, or maybe you're waiting for the conditions to be right, or something that has changed, some confirmation that makes it make sense. And I want to say, most likely, none of those things are going to happen. Like, you got to jump in the pit. Conditions are snowy. Yeah, I know. It's slippery. I know. The pit is deep. I know. The lion's scary, of course. And Benaiah just jumps in. So maybe some of us just need to hear that. Like, stop waiting and jump in. Some of you are Obadiahs, on the other hand, where you're just in a difficult place. And maybe it's a difficult place that you're going to be in for a long time. Maybe it's a job. Maybe it's a family situation. Maybe it's a community. Maybe it's a system that doesn't share your values, doesn't value what you value. And maybe you've been asking yourself for a long time whether the faithful thing to do is to leave. Should I just abandon that? Maybe. Maybe it isn't. And maybe you're there precisely because 100 people need someone on the inside who fears God. Maybe your access, your position, your proximity to the problem, maybe none of that is compromise. Maybe that's not you compromising your values. Maybe that is your calling. The faithfulness God is asking for you might not be so dramatic. Maybe it's just, hey, day after day, I'm going to pull some water from the well. I'm going to take it where it needs to go every single day. I'm going to go to a cave that nobody knows about, that nobody cares, but it's going to be doing something for someone who can't do it for themselves. Maybe that's what it is. And I want to say, if that maybe resonates with you, I'd say don't leave. Don't leave just yet. Maybe God put you there. Certainly don't leave if God put you there. And for all of us, whether we're in the Benaiah category, Obadiah category, here is the thing that this whole series has been trying to say to us. Statistically, most of us will never be in the 3. We can't all be in the top 3. We can't all be at the pointy end of the pyramid. Statistically, there's going to be more of us that are just at the base, right? Like, you can aspire and you can hope, and I'm not saying like, oh, just throw in the towel and be average, but I'm just saying most of us won't be in the 3, and Benaiah wasn't in the 3. And what I mean by that is, let's just be honest, most of us are not going to have a book named after us. Turn in your Bibles to 1 Benaiah. Like, that's going to be most of us, right? That's not going to happen. Most of us are certainly not going to have a church named after us. You're not going to have a sermon series named after you. I mean, these guys got in a sermon series, and the sermon series is called The Forgotten Few. It's the best they get. But the truth is, that's most of us, isn't it? Like, that's going to be most of us. Most of us, that's going to be the story for us. We're going to live, and we're going to serve, and we're going to give, and we're going to show up, and we're going to quietly do the work, and nobody's going to get any notice when we do that. No one's going to pay attention to any of that. And then someday we'll be gone, and the world's going to keep turning, and people aren't going to know our names. That's just the truth. And I'm not trying to be glib, but that's the truth. But here is the thing. We have spent 8 weeks with people that understood something that most people miss, and that is the size of the stage has nothing to do with the significance of the act, when the act is faithfulness. It doesn't matter how big the stage is. God has a long history of doing His most important work through people that nobody was watching. And all of the work will be rewarded someday, especially the work that nobody else but God saw. So the faithfulness is measured by not how many books are named after you and what the sermon series is titled, all that. It's whether you showed up. It's whether you used what was in your hand. It's whether you stayed when staying was hard and moved when moving was terrifying. Shamgar picked up the axe goad. The woman picked up the millstone. Jabez picked up his wound, took it to God. Rhoda just sprinted away with joy. Epaphroditus rolled the dice with his life. The boy opened his hand. 5 sisters walked into the room and asked. Benaiah jumps in the pit, and Obadiah stays in the den. The forgotten few, not all of us are going to look the same, but faithfulness still matters.